We're at State of OpenCon 2025, run by OpenUK, and here we have Guy Podjarny. He is the CEO and founder of Tessl, after previously having co-founded Snyk. So how's your day been so far? I know you said it's quite busy.
Yeah, it's been good. I've had four stage appearances today, and
what about yesterday?
It's been good. Actually, haven't gotten around to sort of being here yesterday. I've had a couple of meetings even with people from the conference, but couldn't make the event itself. But it's been good. Good people, good hallway conversations on it, great questions posted in.
So the thing I want to start off with is you were in Unit 8200, which is like an elite unit. It's a sick place to be, and one of the coolest things in the world. So how did you get in? Like, what was the process like? Why did they select you?
Yeah, so it's true. I sort of say that I was in the cyber parts of the Israeli army. I kind of feel like I should note that I'm actually quite critical of Israel's current activity in doing it. So while that is very much a part of my roots and kind of heritage, I am quite critical of their current activities. Look, it's a process. You know, at this point, it's a fairly well-oiled machine. When you're all 16-year-olds in Israel go through from there to 18, a filtering process, and I basically went through a whole bunch of those tracks, and eventually they've gotten pretty good at finding the best people for specific jobs on it, and I was fortunate in many ways, you know, to sort of make some cut over there, and then you work with very high caliber individuals around you, and you learn, you grow faster. For me, coming out of that it's like a little bit equivalent to the being in an Ivy League, in the sense that the network of people that were there before you pull you into jobs, like it starts opening a network. So I actually don't have a degree. I just sort of went straight from that type of certification process, if you will, or like a certificate of potential into the industry.
So we spoke to Ron yesterday, and he said a similar thing. He said that Unit 8200 is like a melting pot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
and clearly it is.
Yeah, I mean, 8200 is massive, and within that there are sort of subdivisions, but it's become a little bit of the catch-all for those groups. And there's definitely, I think part of it is coming back to this, like, necessity is the mother of all invention. You basically get tasked with problems, and there's no option of sort of saying, oh, this doesn't work, we'll pivot. It's like, no, this is the problem that needs to be solved. And then if you work on that with other individuals who are capable, you can learn from them. Like in that surrounding, you grow faster. And so this requirement to persevere and face this problem and not being able to back out, combined with kind of a high caliber set of collaborators, I think really forms both ability and resilience that is very relevant to the world of startups, in which you battle this type of these types of failures on a regular basis.
Yeah, so speaking of startups, you founded Snyk a number of years ago. Could you just talk us through the process and what sort of led you to start Snyk?
Yeah, so Snyk was actually my second startup. I first founded, my first company was Blaze. Blaze was when I was living in Ottawa, Canada, and it made websites faster. It was kind of at the very beginning of the DevOps revolution, and I got to be a part of that wave. I sold Blaze to Akamai, where I was CTO for a few years, and got to really kind of appreciate the world of DevOps, and had the good fortune of being in the right place at the right time to be part of that sort of first wave. And prior to that, I was working on application security products that we wanted to get to developers, but we failed regularly. Because we managed to, we built a good business selling to security people, but we could never really pierce through to developers. And so Snyk to me was very much the culmination of those two journeys, was really saying, hey, I've sort of seen and I understand AppSec, and I know the criticality of getting it to developers. I see DevOps now. I know it's only making it more critical because software development is accelerating. It's even more critical to embed security into software development. And lo and behold, now we have in DevOps a playbook, or something that we can mimic to say, hey, can we bring DevOps-style innovations into security and build a developer tooling company that tackles security? And so that was the sort of the insight to it. I think part of it was also, Blaze was a really good journey. It was quick, kind of put me in a good place, but it was quick, and I kind of had a little bit something left in me of saying, hey, I want to go longer. I want to build something big. Also at Blaze, I called myself CTO, and at Snyk, I called myself CEO. And I wanted to run the business. I've sort of learned a lot of that, being an exec at Akamai. And so all of those kind of drove me to found another thing and try to go for something big that at the time, was like, hey, nobody doubted its usefulness, but people doubted whether it can be done to like break through to developers. And I guess I think this is 9.5 years ago now since I founded Snyk, and I feel that piece, like Snyk is doing very, very well and it's growing, it's doing that, but above and beyond what happens with Snyk the company, I think today the market's approach into like when it comes to security and developers and how important it is and how possible it is to embed security in software development is very different. I think it's now accepted as a must, and it's more conversations about techniques to make it easier and better versus kind of a claim that no, it just can't be done.
Yeah, I had this realization a few weeks ago, which is that to have truly secure software, you need every single developer on your project to like know the ins and outs of the system and their language, which just obviously isn't plausible.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it like that, it's kind of obvious that we see attacks all the time from across the world. It's just scary.
And I think so. Security is a scary world, and it's an asymmetric place. And so the attacker only needs to find one openings, while the defender needs to close everything off. But I will say that that's precisely where tools kick in. And so, would all developers become security experts? That will never happen. But what technology allows you to do, even especially today with sort of the waves of AI, but also Snyk's core products, some of which initially did not include AI, and later in static analysis they do. They can build in that expertise. And now the next question is really a UX question. It's like, fine, you have something that can be a smart sort of vulnerability finder and fixer. What is a reasonable way to introduce it into software development that is not too much of a burden? And I think that was really Snyk's innovation. I think in some sort of family of innovations and startups, that is what needs to be cracked. Sometimes you want to advance the state of technology, make it a smarter security expert, but oftentimes that is not the bottleneck. But the bottleneck is how do you make it native in the user's environment? And I think that was the mistake that happened in the security world up until now. The expertise level was actually pretty good. The problem was that the tools were built for security auditors, and then they were just kind of plopped into some build system instead of starting from the point of saying, well, if I'm a developer and I want to tackle security, what do I need? What tool would fill at home amidst my other dev tools? And that's the approach we took. So I would say, we've innovated technologically and in that expertise, but probably our primary innovation, our primary disruption came from taking a different approach to the product and then building the necessary tech to make that possible.
And now at Tessl, it seems to me your primary innovation is not building the product, but developing new technology almost.
So Tessl, maybe a word about Tessl. So Tessl's kind of mission is to reimagine software development for the AI era. And generally our view is that whenever new technologies come along, and AI is a big example of that, the easiest way to try and put them to use is to work within the existing workflows. And that's what we're doing with AI today. We're taking the existing way we develop software and we're just trying to automate pieces of it, make the writing of the code, the writing of the test, the creation of the docs, all of those faster, but we're not changing the workflow too much. We're creating new UX for writing code, and then everything else is kind of the same. The software remains code-centric. So it really revolves around, you create a whole bunch of code, and then over time you forget all of these, whether it's prompts or requirements documents that got you to write that code, those disappear in the ether. A year later, good luck finding them. The only thing that lives over time is the code. And we think the true opportunity with AI, and specifically in software development, is to rethink the processes, rethink the workflow from first principles. That's what we've seen with DevOps, for instance, right? Really try to challenge, don't just lift and shift to the cloud, but rather, invent microservices and invent continuous deployment. And so we think in the opportunity in software development is to change software to be spec-centric. So instead of having this implementation, you got a bunch of requirements, you created an implementation, and now the implementation lives on, and over time you kind of forget what were the requirements in the first place, and you have to kind of decipher them out of the code, which makes for a messy and fragile environment. Instead, you actually make the requirements be the central document. You say, here's my specification, here is what I want built, here are some tests, or how I would validate that what was built is correct, and then that becomes the canonical document that lives over time. And from that, AI generates the code. And the next day it can generate another code, and the next week it can generate other piece of code, and it can generate the right code for the current context and customize it. But the code becomes the disposable thing, and the requirements become the persistent thing. And I think that is a kind of a big ambition, and it actually has all of the challenges. It has the technology challenge of, how do you actually make this work? You need to invent the development paradigm of what are the primitives here, what are the core tenets, what is a spec, what are these tests, how do you find out when an LLM has made a decision, how do you debug such a system, how do you observe such a system, and then subsequently it has the AI problem of, okay, now can the AI actually generate the stuff that you've defined? And then subsequently it has the product question of, as a developer, like how do you make this fun? How do you make this kind of a usable product? How do you relate it to practices today? And eventually how do you expand from just software developers today to other creators of software that might not be coders? And so there's a lot. We're sort of taking all the challenges, but we think the opportunity is worth it, and I feel like the team is of a caliber that can pull it off.
You've built 3 companies, and every single time they get bigger and bigger and bigger, with grander goals. And you obviously need, you're clearly good at getting a good team, especially the founding team at the beginning. So what's your secret? What do you look for? And how have you done it in Tessl so far? And what do you intend to do in the next couple of years in terms of building your team?
Well, first of all, I would sort of say the team is everything. You need to have a mission that is worthwhile and is big, and then you need to get really bright people. You need to steer them correctly. But really, getting the right people is so fundamental. I know it always seems easier. Like at Blaze, nobody would come work for me. Nobody. I literally tried to hire anybody I thought was half decent, and everybody said no. And eventually I got someone to join as a co-founder, and then some people, specifically one person wanted to come work for him, and then other people wanted to come work for that person. Okay. So sometimes it's just about that. At Snyk, I already had notoriety. I've already founded and sold a company. I was CTO at Akamai. And still, many people did not know. And it's hard, it's so scary when you're just founding the company. There's just a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk, and people are afraid of taking that leap. And so it was a little bit easier to get a few people because of that sort of history. But in many cases, it was perseverance. I had people in the team that I've chased for months, friendly but persistently. And maybe now, and how about now? I have one amazing person, Anna Debenham, who I think she'd be okay with me naming her, who did not reply to my emails for 2 months, and then I got her to reply to my emails, and then she booked a meeting for me 2 months later, hoping I'd go away, and then she joined as a contractor on it, because okay, just for a few months, and then a few months later she became an employee, and she's incredible, and she's now working at Tessl, and she, I had to persist. So I think first one, a lot of those are just persistence and find creative solutions. Tessl is a bit different. Tessl, I have the luxury of knowing more people that I have a good trusting relationship with, and building those so it was easier. Still, good people have good options, and so you have to talk to a lot of people to find people that are not just great, but also that this catches their passion and that they're in a place that they're willing to make the leap. And so you have to be patient, you have to not be, building startups, building companies is very much an exercise in being comfortable with no, and then also being uncomfortable or unwilling to accept it as a final no. So you need to not get too dispirited when someone turns you down, because it'll kind of happen all the time. Employees, customers, investors, and at the same time, you need to identify when is it important to persist. And maybe sometimes you become a little bit annoying. I hope I walk that line okay. But you build those out. I think the Tessl team is the strongest founding team I've definitely ever formed and maybe ever worked with, I think. So I'm very excited and humbled that all these brilliant people want to come join this mission. And I do think it's an exciting mission. So some of it is people. When you get good people, other good people want to come work with them as well. So there's a flywheel element to it.
Yeah. On Tessl, you sort of have visions of the shift with AI and how it can completely change how we develop. And as you said, from being sort of writing code to being the defining specs and things like that. But people are resistant to change, and I just wanted to know, why do you believe that you can convince other people that this is the way forward, and what sort of drives your belief, and how are you going to convince people?
Yeah, no, well, frankly, I feel this is bigger than Tessl. I think this will happen with or without Tessl, and it's just an opportunity to build the leading platform in this space. Look, I think there's just no other way. Like, when you think about how you create software today with LLMs, it feels very magical, but also very unpredictable, right? You put in some words and some software gets created, and then you put in some other words, and then suddenly something significant changes. And today, you can only build software that you're able to directly verify. So, on one hand, you might be writing code, and then you verify that code. But clearly that is finite. If you produce a large amount of code, you can't really verify. Then you've produced enough of that code as the AI, you don't even know the code, so even verifying that is hard. So there's definitely like a limited amount of like, I produce the code and the way I confirm it was correctly created is by looking at the code. Similarly, you can create an application and review it by hand. You basically click all the buttons and doing it. That's usable for whatever, some quiz you put together for Christmas for your sort of family, but clearly, you can continue to verify all the product every time by hand. So what do you do? Well, you're going to create some regression tests. You're going to create some tests to say, well, just make sure that the thing that got generated is like does not deviate, right? That I said this button is red and it's going to remain red. And okay, you have the test. How would the LLM know that the button needs to be red? You need some instruction that says the button is supposed to be red that is upstream from the generation. Okay. So you now have a piece of instruction and a test. Lo and behold, you have a spec. You have some statement that says, these are the instructions to the LLM. They're not just a transcript of a chat. They are like a little bit more structured. And then they include some test. And so I think that we have to get to that. And you sort of see this, you see memory, you see inklings of that in all the tools. And then from there you start saying, okay, so if I have these specs, how do I version these things? What happens when I want to change the language? What do I persist or not? When the LLM has made the decisions, how do I engage with them? When something doesn't go wrong, like doesn't work, how do I debug the system? How do I observe such a system when it's running? How do I collaborate with other team members on these things? And really, you basically get to Tessl's vision. Like you get to the fact that we have to build a development paradigm, a new development process that rotates around those. And so this is I think the challenge that you kind of legitimately say is, one is this is a change, and so people need to work differently, and so we need to think how you do that. And then two is, this is at the edge of the possible technologically in terms of what the LLMs can do. It works today for a relatively simple software, but as a startup, you have to anchor in the future, and you have to think about a need that in 5 years' time will be a lot greater, not weaker. Otherwise, you're not going to have a shelf life. Like you will sort of die on the vine. You would have created a local maxima, and you'll get stuck. And I think getting stuck is worse than crashing and burning in startup land. You just kind of get stuck with a middling company that is just not what you signed up for. And so we are designing Tessl and our vision and our platform for a world in which generation is powerful and cheap. And I think we keep getting validated that is where we're going. And we're sort of trying to manage or wrangle today's soon-to-be legacy LLMs to also work in this fashion and deliver it, at least for simple software, to provide some value today, because we do want to work with users. But so to an extent, I don't know, it's hard for me to imagine a path, and I talked to a lot of smart people, and I've yet to hear anyone express a path that does not lead to something like Tessl needing to exist.
And just quickly, if somebody wants to find out more about Tessl, where can they go? What can they do?
So we would love people to join the community. We have the AI native dev community. You can find it on Tessl.io. You'll sort of see all the links to it. We think it is just as critical as building a platform here is to engage people with it. We don't think there will be one spec, one tool. We think this is a chain of capabilities, and we think this new development paradigm should be built together with the community, and we'd love to provide a stage for people to share their learnings, their opinions, their tools in that process, and that is the AI native dev community. So would love for you to go to Tessl.io, register, and start participating in our podcast, the AI native dev podcast, and in the event that we're running, AI native DevCon, that runs it twice a year, and in the community itself, the Discord for it. We'd love to hear from you. And I appreciate you helping sort of share these opportunities. And I think it's an exciting future, and people should engage with it instead of fearing it. I think it's a transformation and change is hard and is scary, but I think this is one domain which I would highly recommend to any software developer today to run towards this, as opposed to trying to run away, because the latter strategy is not going to work.
LLMs are so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Thank you so much for not just talking to us, coming to the event, but also trying to build and imagine our future. Because I'm excited for what Tessl will be.
Wonderful. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for speaking to us, and it's been great having you at State of OpenCon.